the running back 9 months ago. The media lamenting, running backs lamenting their future, their economic future. And here we watch Detroit and Green Bay and Baltimore and Washington. These power running teams are now front and center. Do you think there's a reason for it schematically?
I do. I think there's a number of reasons. And maybe we don't know the exact why all these teams, and Philly obviously is probably the number one example. They lead the league in rushing. But what you're seeing more of in the league are a couple of things in no particular order, Colin. You're seeing a lot more 12 personnel. Offenses are playing with more multiple tight ends, 2, sometimes 3 tight ends. You're seeing issues with offensive lines in pass protection. That's been a major issue throughout the league for a lot of teams. So if you have issues in pass protection, you try to run the football and alleviate that problem. I would say there's been a far more too high safety structure coverages in the league. That's been a trend over the last couple of years, where there's more too high safeties as opposed to a safety sitting in the box. So the numbers tend to favor the run game. And I would say another thing is more and more teams are playing what we call big nickel, playing with 3 safeties as sort of a base defense as opposed to a third linebacker. So you're seeing smaller players on the field. So the run game has become more and more prevalent. But overall, the pass protection thing really stands out to me, because I remember years ago, I had a conversation with John Gruden, and one of the first things he said to me was, you don't have a pass game if you can't protect. And protection has been a big issue in the league.
Yeah, we get.
Yeah, it's the NFL is such a pendulum, and we saw how passing just went through the roof, and it was just big time. And then it was like, you got to get wide receivers, and you obviously need the quarterback with the arm, and you do that, and you're gonna win. And they started changing rules to make it so that these players can catch big balls and not get in trouble, and not get their head knocked off. And it was all in on that. And then it was like, so many wide receivers now were coming out of the draft. You don't even got to pay for them necessarily, because it was just like every single draft was another big name wide receiver that you were going to have to start to get familiar with, because he was going to be that dude, unless you obviously watch college and know all of them coming out of the draft. And now it's swinging back, because again, defenses have changed. Things have shifted a little bit, and as Greg is also pointing out, kind of pass protection is becoming more problematic, which is interesting, because then I would like to know maybe why that necessarily is. I don't have a strong sense as to where some of the limitations are from that perspective. But the reality is like, the run game was always important. It's just that there was the strong sense that you didn't need a big, flashy, expensive running back, because, and again, these are made up numbers, because let's say you paid and had this big name, popular running back, he would average, and again, these are made up numbers, 100 yards a game, but that for a fraction of the price, you could draft a third round running back, and he'll get 90 yards a game. And it's like, well, listen, we got 90 yards. Those extra 10 yards are not worth the amount of money. It's not worth the draft capital and how much you're going, and where you're drafting someone, and it's just not worth it. And so with what came with that then was a combination of not only philosophy in terms of like what you're actually going to do with X's and O's, a philosophy in terms of what's important and what you need in terms of the types of players and what you're going to pay for, which then came also a level of popularity. Now wide receivers are really, really popular. I mean, the wide receivers have always been popular, but it's just like the running back level of popularity. There was no more of these, and this is going too far back, but like the Emmitt Smiths of the world, where it just was just not really on the radar. And any of the really exciting running backs that people really started to like or were popular was like a Christian McCaffrey, who wasn't seen as like a regular running back. And I think in order to almost be popular, now I mean popular in terms of like fans, you needed to be very, very, very unique, like even like a Derrick Henry, who Derrick Henry was known to just just be an absolute monster. Like, wasn't the whole thing that he was like a Pepsi machine or something like that? I don't even know, but it was like obviously like this physical freak that could not be ignored, that people are just want to point and look at and be like, oh my god, what is that? And any of these other more traditional running backs were just kind of swept under the rug, weren't as popular. And Saquon Barkley, to a degree, kind of almost kind of breaks that trend a little bit, because he's obviously incredibly gifted and dynamic, but in terms of I would say that he's probably closer technically to like a more average Joe running back appearance wise, not in terms of his performance, but just appearance wise, outside of obviously some of his really ridiculous things that he does, like reverse hurls and stuff like that. When you look at like a Derrick Henry, it's just that size. It can jump off more, I feel, a little bit easier. I feel like unless you really understand ball and can really appreciate, like, oh my god, did he just do a spin move, into a hole? Like, you have to really know. And again, when I'm saying popularity, I'm talking about people who are not watching every single game, aren't all around the league. Like, they'll watch, the game, the highlights, and it's just things need to really jump out. Someone needs to just look physically unique. If you see Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry standing side to side, you'll be like, oh my god, who the heck is Derrick Henry? Because he looks so physically imposing. Like, that's the argument that I'm just trying to really paint clearly, to avoid anyone coming at me saying I'm saying something bad about someone like Saquon. But it is just kind of interesting to see how important it is, and it makes sense, because I think also when there was such this heavy pass first offense, not even just, I think also what Greg Cosell should have mentioned, sure, you don't have the pass protection, and that's kind of part of the problem, and you have some of the looks with the safeties and stuff like that. I think that's all relevant, obviously, but I think it's also, you have to realize that not every quarterback is a great passer, is an elite passer. There was this whole conversation that Dan Orlovsky did, but I didn't do the clip because I've already talked about the Eagles so much. But Dan Orlovsky highlighted how he thinks that there's really not a true on-field problem with the Philadelphia Eagles and A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts and stuff like that. That, yeah, there's definitely some throws that Jalen is missing, but some of these throws and some of the decisions that he's making are because of that's what the defenses are giving him, and they're actually smart. And again, actually, Orlovsky was pretty critical of Hurts earlier on in the season. So the fact that he's defending him here, I think, goes a long way. But then someone else asked him, and he said, okay, that's well and good, but then, like, what about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? Because, the defenses know that they're going to try to do everything they can to take away Jamar Chase. Why is it that they're able to why is Joe Burrow able to get the ball to Jamar Chase and not, and Hurts can't get the ball to A.J. Brown? And Orlovsky's just like, the reality is like Jalen Hurts is not the passer that Joe Burrow is. And again, it's not even just a matter of arm strength and ball placement. It's just being able to get to be as much of a playmaker within the pocket, moving around within the pocket, being able to process things, much more quickly and get the ball out in a way that's more conducive to that. And that's always something that really angers people when you talk about it with various quarterbacks. And it's just not everyone is going to be as great of a passer as Joe Burrow, even if on the surface they still both throw a very beautiful ball and can throw the ball 60 yards down the field in the air in a tight window, in the breadbasket. Like, it's being a quarterback is more than just that. I got news for you. There's actually a ton of quarterbacks who can make that 50-yard throw and push it down the field and do all that, but they're not good at a lot of other things, right? Those guys end up playing like flag football, or they don't ever get out of college or high school even. Like, it's so much more than just that. And I think that's something that a lot of teams had to kind of grapple with and understand and say, oh, you know what? The run game can be a lot more reliable, right? When we establish this run game, it actually makes us more versatile than just being so dependent on passing, unless we really, really have a special quarterback. And even with that really, really special quarterback, if you don't have the run game, your scoring may be fast, but then you're also potentially having a little bit quicker drives, which means now your defense is back on the field and you can't keep the other opposing offense off the field. And that's what they even talk about going up against players like Patrick Mahomes and whatnot. It's like the best way to beat him is to keep him off the field. And the best way to keep him off the field is to have sustained drives. And the best way to have sustained drives is by running the ball. So again, everything is kind of always kind of course correcting, being reevaluated, changing. Defenses are catching up, and then eventually I'm sure we'll see the pendulum swing even more, and it'll be like harder to get the run game going, and the averages will come down, and then they're gonna have to attack more passing again. And it's just, again, it's gonna kind of continue to evolve and grow and morph right now. But right now, obviously, the run game is huge, and you would feel way better with a dominant run game than anything, especially because we've seen, especially last year, like these cold, brutally cold weather playoff games and whatnot, snow, storms, blizzards, 20 below, and it's like, what is better? Having a running back that's just going to be barrel through you in that? I mean, when you think about it, the Chiefs played against the Dolphins, brutal, freezing cold game, obviously. We know that. And then they played against the Bills. The Bills, like prior to that, had a massive snowstorm, also freezing cold, hitting wide receivers in their hands, and their hands are going numb, right? And then the following game against the Ravens, it was raining. So it's just like these wet, cold, ugly snow, rain, weather games happen in the playoffs, and the run game is the most reliable in those instances, especially on the road. So these playoffs are going to be really, really interesting to see how they unfold, and how much, if these teams like Philly, Baltimore, Washington, Detroit, Green Bay, if their run game ends up being the difference maker in a playoff game. Like I'm really excited to see how much of an impact that happens, because it's also unfortunately angering some wide receivers out there. So, we will see. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the value of the running back, and kind of how it's changed over time, and how it kind of is going over here, going over there, going over here, going over there? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.